Welcome everybody, welcome to THT, and today we are going to talk about everything that Fantasy Flight Game needs to do to make Star Wars Unlimited the best game that it can be in 2026. As I said many times, I think 2026 is a year that's going to be, it's either going to make or break Star Wars Unlimited as a game, and there's a lot of challenges ahead of time. But there's also a lot of things to be hopeful about. There's a lot of things that are going in the right direction. In this video, I've basically regrouped all the feedback, all the recommendation that I've heard from the community, but also ideas on how to fix them, how to make Star Wars Unlimited a better game. This is obviously only my opinion, but I've tried to regroup everything in one big video, so expect a very long video. There's a lot to talk about. Big thanks to Card Market for sponsoring this video. And now we're ready to move on to the video itself. And before we get into the core of the video, I just want, of course, to talk about the recent booster pack update that Fantasy Flight did on their stream, where they talked about many changes that they're going to do to the booster pack. I'm just going to give my opinions on each of those changes, or whether I think they're positive or negative. Starting first with the fact that they are not doing any regular foils anymore. I believe this changes is very positive, and nobody cared about regular foils. I think the only people who cared about regular foils were people who simply wanted to grab cards for cheaper, because in some cases regular foils were even cheaper than regular cards, which was just a symptom of them being extremely unpopular. And eventually for people who make master sets, I think it's going to make master set actually easier to put together, which I think is a positive. And yeah, nobody pretty much cared about regular foils in this set. I'll touch on later on in this video on how to make foil more attractive and better in general, because we're still gonna have foil with between the hyperspace and also the any other promo cards. But I believe that getting rid of regular foils is a very good move. The fact that, so basically what is going to be replacing the foils are going to be hyperspace card. Is going to be hyperspace guaranteed in every pack, so that's good because hyperspace are actually attractive, so people actually care about hyperspace. And I believe making a deck fully made out of hyperspace is going to be a lot easier after the changes, because hyperspace cards are going to be a lot easier to put together, which I think is great, because it's going to encourage people to go after those hyperspace more aggressively, because they know it's a realistic prospect to actually build a deck entirely made of hyperspace card. They also are going to be giving a small chance to find unknown photo prestige cards in regular boosters. Regular boosters were definitely missing a little something to make them more attractive. I think it's a step in the right directions in order to make prestige cards a bit more attractive than compared to what they were. So I think it's really positive that they are doing something like this. The only thing I'm a little bit afraid of with this change is that I believe I'm a little bit afraid that it will basically make the Carbonite booster box kind of redundant a little bit. I feel like they need to do a little something for Carbonite boxes to be attractive, now that the prestige cards, which used to be the exclusivity to the Carbonite boosters, are being moved on. The Carbonite boxes will basically feature more hyperspace cards and more hyperspace foil cards, which makes sense because we're getting rid of the regular foils. So if you want to build a fully hyperspace deck, buying Carbonite boxes is going to be a good way to do it. There's also going to be a lower chance of showcases in Carbonite, which is, I think it's a good change, because I think the chance of showcase in Carbonite was too high, which basically crashed the price of showcases. Showcases are not nearly as valuable as they used to be, and I think for a collecting standpoint, it's not a good thing for the game. So I think the fact that they are reducing the rate in which you're getting showcases in Carbonite is a positive, even though it has the disadvantage of once again devaluing the Carbonite. So basically, between the fact that we are getting prestige in regular booster box and the fact that showcases pulls are reduced for Carbonite, I'm afraid that those two changes combined together is going to make Carbonite less attractive. We'll see how it goes. New serialized rarities are basically, now there's some basically serialized are going to be harder to obtain. I think this is something that the collectors have been asking for a while, that there's simply just too many serialized. So yeah, I guess it's positive. Also, there won't be, whenever you get a rare bases, you won't get it into your rare slot, it will be in the base slots instead. Which is great, because it's very frustrating whenever your rare base are really bad in draft most of the time, and they're also not very valuable because you only need one, so they basically have almost no value. So having them on your rare slot always felt very bad, whether you were drafting or whether you were actually opening the packs just for collecting. Either way, having a rare base always felt bad. So I believe that having those rare bases in the base slots makes a lot more sense. The only thing I'm wondering is whether or not this is gonna be how it's gonna work for drafting. So if you open a booster, normally you're supposed to isolate the base out of the pack before you start drafting. I wonder how it's gonna work. Are you gonna be allowed to keep the rare base if you open a rare base? So that gives you kind of a free pick if you open a rare bases. I wonder how that's gonna work in draft. I guess it's gonna work like this, but we haven't had a confirmation yet, as far as I'm aware. This is only gonna start from a lawless time moving forward. It's not no, after a lawless time. So a lawless time still gonna have the rare base in the rare slot. No cost change for boosters, which I think is kind of granted, I would say. And very, very, very important, very underrated change. No more ugly Fog of War borders for weekly showdowns and PQ promos. This is going to go a long way in making those promos far more attractive. Those type of Fog of War borders were extremely ugly and instantly devalued basically the value of those promo cards. So just to give you a glimpse on how they look like, basically the cards are going to look very similar to the card that we are getting in Galaxy Championship, sector qualifiers, and regional qualifiers. It should have been like this from the start. It's great that we are finally getting that. It's just simply just an amazing change. It's gonna make it so it's gonna increase the value of those cards tremendously because they're gonna be so much more desirable. It's gonna boost showdown participation. It's gonna boost PQ participation, and more importantly, it's gonna boost weekly play participation because you can get those weekly packs for free. And this has no additional cost to Fantasy Flight game, and this simple change will really add a lot in terms of the attendance of those events. And I think that's obviously very important because weekly plays, I've always said it and I'll say it again, is the lifeblood of the game. This is where the game looks like on a week-to-week basis. So this is an absolute amazing change, and I cannot wait to put my hands on these. So and this is a change that have been requested. If you remember from back into my video on my wishlist 2025, I actually requested that change, and they're finally doing it. So moving on into what are we going to get for 2026. So before we before we get into actually what are my recommendations and what are the things that I want to see for 2026, let's start first of all about what we're going to get. We're going to have, of course, a lawless time. We're going to have, of course, the elephant in the room, that we're going to get rotation and the implementation of eternal format. That's going to be a massive change to the game. I know that rotation is not necessarily anonymously loved. There's going to be a lot of players, especially the casual players, who just don't like rotation and just simply would rather see no rotation. Thankfully, there's going to be an alternative, Eternal, and I think whether they manage Eternal well and make Eternal actually have events, so then people who don't like rotation can actually play that format instead. I hope that's going to be implemented, so then everybody kind of is happy, and we'll see. I think we really need rotation. I'm not going to go over it. I made an entire video about why is rotation necessary, especially for a game like Star Wars Unlimited. I'm not going to go over it. I'll put the link in the description for people who are interested to hear my arguments on why we need rotation. And obviously very excited to have two competitive constructed format. That's basically double the meta to study double of the deck building possibilities. That's going to be super, super cool. Other big change is going to be, of course, a new booster pack, which I've broken down in a previous slide. Then obviously 3 additional sets, which is obviously they're keeping the same rhythm, 1 set every 4 months, which I think is a great rhythm in my opinion. A lawless time, which is, as we know, it's a death focus on multicolor cards, credit token, and it's gonna be, of course, all about the bounty hunters. Kind of like it's a repeat in terms of theme. It's a repeat of Shadow of the Galaxy in terms of theme. Then we're gonna have Ashes of the Empire, which I believe is gonna be dealing with the fall of the Empire. So basically anything that happens between episode 6 and episode 7 of the Star Wars trilogy. So it's going to be super interesting as well, because it's an era that is not very known. So lots of interesting things. And then finally Homeworld, which I believe will focus on planets and on the different species that are very linked to a specific planet. So I'm thinking about the Gungans, the Ewoks, and all that stuff. So I think it's a really cool set. Personally, Homeworld is the one I'm the most excited about, but I'm obviously very excited for all 3 of those sets. And on top of this, we're also going to get 2 additional sets. So there's a new weekly play cards that we talked about, and there's obviously 2 new mini sets. The first one is going to be a Twin Suns, a series of pre-constructed Twin Suns decks, similar to the pre-constructed Commander deck that we have in Magic. So it's great for Twin Suns players, and this allows them, of course, to explore new game design that is specific to the Twin Suns formats. I think Twin Suns is basically going to be the main format for playing Star Wars Unlimited casually. So I think it's a very, very important format to support. And I think it's a good time to release this format. I think any earlier than this would have been too early. I think it's a perfect time for this to come in. And then the Icon set. So this is the set that I don't really know what they're trying to do with this. My understanding is like it's going to be a little bit similar for Battle for Hoth in terms of like being like an introductory product with some reprints. Apparently everything in the Icons is going to be legal in Premiere as far as I understand. So I don't really know exactly what to expect for this. The theme of this mini expansion is going to be iconic character, which I found it to be a little bit odd, because in every set we get iconic characters. Like there's literally 5 versions of Darth Vader, 4 versions of Anakin, 5 or 6 versions of Han Solo. So I don't really understand really what this stands. It's probably going to make a lot more sense when we're actually going to get it. But so far I'm a little bit I don't really know exactly what to expect with this. So we've talked about the positive things. Now let's talk about the things that FFG needs to be better at and what I'm hoping for in 2026. And we're going to start with anything related to gameplay and balance. And the first things I want to talk about is the leader problem. So something that was not so obvious in 2024, but has been very obvious in 2025, especially in Legend of the Force and Secrets of Power, is that leaders are simply just not good enough. So you could make the argument that indeed, as we are moving forward and as more sets are being added to the game, it's normal that it's more difficult for upcoming leaders to actually compete. The problem that even if you take this into account, there's simply just in proportions just way too few leaders from those sets that actually matter. And it has been a very big problem for the game. So if I give you, so this is only an example, but I could do the exact same slide for Secret of Power. If I look at all the leaders that were implemented from Legend of the Force, you will realize that only 2 of them actually saw consistent amount of competitive play, Mos Talzins and Kylo Ren. There's a couple of leaders that you can make work with a specific build, but overall, the only 2 leaders that saw consistent play. 2 leaders out of 18 is not a satisfactory amount. This is simply just not good for the game, that there are just so few leaders that are good. And so the reason why it's a really big problem that there are too few leaders that are good in Constructed is because leaders are the main catalyst that allows you to create new deck and enable new archetypes. So if leaders are not good, it really stifles innovation, it stifles the possibility of new decks to be built. And it really doesn't feel great, because it feels like you're just doing more of the same. And this has been a problem in Star Wars Unlimited for a while, where even though the card changes, the leaders are always the same, which doesn't give you the feeling of renewal that a new set should give you. And I think this is where they need to work on. I think the leaders needs to be a lot better. So there's a problem of too few leaders for Constructed being good in the upcoming sets. And the other problem is the leaders not being balanced for draft. There's basically the rare and the rare leaders that are almost unplayable in draft, and that's a problem because your chances of actually finding a rare leaders out of your pool is relatively high, even though they are rarer than the common leaders. Do still have some fairly good chance to find one in your pool, and if you end up with like 2 or sometimes even 3 leaders in your draft pool, you end up being completely stifled out of options. And that can just make you lose the draft because you simply didn't have a playable leader. And even among common leaders, there are just too many common leaders that are not good. So I would say the 2 major problems we're facing right now is not enough good leaders in constructed, and 2 large power gaps between the different leaders in draft. So my suggestion to fix this problem, because in this video we're going to talk about problems, but we're also going to talk about solutions. And my solution is to make fewer but better leaders. So my suggestion is that we need to have 8 common leaders, right? Because we need 1 leaders for every color combination for draft. If we don't do this, draft simply just doesn't work. But then instead of having 8 rare leaders, I would suggest 2 rare leaders. I don't think we need to have 8 rare leaders in every single set. Because rare leaders are meant to be for constructed play, and for constructed play I would rather have 2 well-designed rare leaders for constructed rather than 8 rare leaders and then most of them are just unplayable. And obviously I'm also hoping that some common leaders will also be playable for constructed as well. And then finally 2 special leaders which basically are also meant for constructed play, which brings us to 12 leaders instead of 18, which I think would make it so the main advantage of this is that, so the design philosophies are obviously common leaders should be more standard, safe design, things that basically are meant to work for limited play in priority, and if they are good and constructed then that's a bonus, but they are mostly should be built around limited and balanced for limited, which is unfortunately not always the case. There's many common leaders in current sets that are not playable even in limited. A good example for this, for example, C3PO from Secrets of Power, unplayable in standard. It's actually I think C3PO is actually more playable in constructed than it is in draft, which is very sad. Leaders that are unplayable or too good for limited should be in a spotlight deck. So if there's a leader that is completely unplayable in draft or completely busted, it should go in the spotlight decks. Basically, that's kind of my concept. And then finally, the rare leaders should be made to be kind of crazy out of the box design, things that really change the way you play, and aim to be competitively viable in constructed. I think every single rare and spotlight leaders should be playable in constructed, and I think we should be doing this. So what is the advantage of having fewer leaders? The first advantage is obviously that fewer leaders to balance, more time to playtest and tune each of them. I think that probably my guess of the reason why they're struggling with leader design is there's just too many leaders that they have to balance. They are stretched too thin across too many leaders that they have to test thoroughly, and it's very difficult. I think with fewer leaders, so basically 33% fewer leaders, you would end up with an environment where it's much easier to make sure that every them is tuned for constructed and for limited. Also, one of the advantages is that in draft you have better odds of opening a leader that is actually specifically designed for draft. So basically right now the only thing that regulates, right now even though the rare leaders are basically I would say are more difficult to open, your chances to open a rare leaders in the draft or in sealed is still very, very high. So if you count the common leaders that are not good in draft, which sometimes unfortunately happens as well, you can end up with a pool that is completely unplayable just because of the leaders, and same for draft. And I believe that if the balance is better, but also the chances of finding a rare leaders is smaller because you got a smaller pool of rare leaders, it would actually make you so the odds of just being stuck in limited to be smaller, which I think would be greatly beneficial. Also, I do believe that generally speaking, that FFG needs to understand leader balance better. There's a substantial amount of leaders that are basically unplayable in both constructed and limited. This should not happen. This should not happen. I think that it's excusable if there's certain design that work well in limited and don't work in constructed, and vice versa. But a leader that is unplayable in both formats, that is not good for the game, and there's unfortunately a substantial amount of leaders every single set that are unplayable in both formats. So I think FFG, now they are growing in experience, we're getting more sets, we're giving tons of feedback. I've made an entire series of video where I explain how I would rework the different leaders to make them more balanced. So we have a much better understanding of the game right now. FFG should get better at balancing leaders over time, and I hope they will in 2026. We'll see some substantial boost in terms of playability of leaders. Unfortunately, the two starter leaders that we saw from A Lawless Time did not, unfortunately, meet my expectation. I still think those leaders are too weak, especially Leia. So, they're already kind of like disappointing on that front for now, but hopefully this gets better over time, and hopefully the rest of the leaders are good. But once again, maybe this is coming from the fact that there's too many leaders every single set. I'm gonna make a similar argument for the double aspect cards. Fantasy Flight Games started off very, very strong with the double aspect legendaries from Spark of Rebellion, and those cards were actually very well balanced. They were very, very powerful, but obviously the cost of having to run double aspect is very substantial. I think the only one that is really not good for the game is Vigilance, because it's simply just an auto-include in control decks, and it's not a particularly satisfying win condition for control decks in my opinion. But outside of this, I think they did a great job in Spark of Rebellion with the double aspect legendaries, but then it went really, really downhill after this. So the double aspect card that I'm showing here on the screens are all the double aspect card that will be legal after rotation. So all the double aspect card from set year 1 will be rotating out, and this is what we're going to be left with. And unfortunately, only 2 out of those cards are actually playable in constructed, which is Unity of Purpose and the Mandalorian. And you could argue Unity of Purpose only playable in very specific decks. So it's not good enough. I think double aspect card needs to be less situational and a lot more powerful to justify running a double aspect card. So I think this is a thing that I think we need that FFG needs to improve on. They need to grow a better understanding on the cost of running a double aspect deck. And I believe that one of the problems with double aspect card is that most of them are just very, very situational. And I think that it is just a really bad design decision to make double aspect card situational, because being double aspect by itself already makes you situational, already limits a lot where the card can see play. I think the situational cards should be the single aspect cards, because those can be run in any deck. So you need to limit how much they're gonna see play by making them situational. But double aspect cards should be generally powerful cards, exactly like the double aspect legendaries. So I don't understand why they're making double aspect cards so incredibly niche and situational. I just don't understand why they're doing this, and I think this is the reason why those cards are not seeing any play. Even though a lot of those cards, maybe not all of them, but I think like a lot of those cards would see a lot more play if they were single aspect. So FFG needs to do a better job at designing double aspect cards in general in the game, because it represents a substantial amount of deck building possibilities and opens up new archetypes that wouldn't be possible otherwise. I think color combination is one of the best way they can create new archetypes and open up deck building possibilities. And unfortunately, they're not taking full advantage of the fantastic. They're not taking full advantage of the fantastic aspect system that they've implemented in the initial design of the game, and that's really a shame in my opinion. So moving on now to the next topic is going to be, so this was mostly like the gameplay and the gameplay improvements. This time we're going to talk about aesthetic and collectibility, which I feel like is the weakest aspect of Star Wars Unlimited. I think that from a gameplay standpoint, It could be better, and there's things that can be improved, but overall I think that FFG is doing a pretty good job. The meta has been pretty good, the gameplay is also excellent, so there's no much criticism to be done on this one. There's a lot more things to say about the aesthetic and collectability of the game in general. And the first thing I want to talk about is the big elephant in the room, the most important, we talked about it in the Enigma podcast, what is the most important thing that FFG needs to nail if they want to make the game more profitable and better for local game store, is to make better legendaries. So let me explain you very briefly. Legendaries are what sells regular booster box. People won't buy booster box if legendaries are shit, because all the other cards in the game are fairly affordable, very easy to obtain. And the reason why people are buying regular booster box is to get legendaries. I've said this before and I'll say it again, there's no reason to buy more than 2 booster boxes to get in this game. Like, you buy 2 booster boxes for every single, for any given set, you're gonna get your commons, a couple of rares, a couple of cards to trade, and all you gotta do then is just buy a couple of singles, and you basically all the cards you need for the set, which is really not a good business model in my opinion, and I'll explain to you why very quickly. So the crux of the problem is that if there's no chase cards, so no high value cards, just to give you a reminder, but the most expensive card of Secret of Power is basically ranging around 15 euro. That is just not acceptable. That is just, it's not that it's not acceptable, it's just like, it's just like there's no reason to buy booster box if the most expensive card you can possibly open in that booster box costs 15 quid. So no chase card means that local game store don't sell boxes. If local game store don't sell boxes, they don't make money off Star Wars Unlimited. That means they will stop supporting Star Wars Unlimited. They will stop buying product, which means that you would have to find your product somewhere else. And it also means that they have no incentive to run events for Star Wars Unlimited. They have no incentive to support the community, and all this is part of the ecosystem that keeps the game alive. And if we have local game store dropping the game, which has happened a lot since Twilight of the Republic, so since the end of 2024, it's gonna keep happening and it's gonna kill the game. So this needs to be fixed ASAP. There needs to be real chase card. So obviously they've implemented Carbonites now in regular booster box, which is gonna be good, but that the Carbonites, only collectors really care about them. So only collectors actually care about them. So we need to actually make also players wants to buy booster box, because something you gotta understand about Star Wars Unlimited is that it's not a game that is a collector's game. It's mostly a player's game. It's mostly a game that is run, the majority of people who play Star Wars Unlimited play it to play the game competitively or casually, not to collect it. So there needs to be more incentives for players to buy regular boosters, and the only way to do this is to make the legendaries more powerful in general. So this is the reason why we need to make legendary powerful. So it's gonna make the game more expensive, yes, but I think it's needed. Chase cards enhance the boost. Another positive about chase cards is that they enhance the booster opening experience. Right now, opening booster boxes for Star Wars Limited is extremely boring, because once again, the most valuable card you can get is 15 quid. So as I said, so putting Carbonites in regular booster box is gonna make this a little bit more nicer, I would say. But I think that once again, making better legendaries will also be a great way to make booster opening experience a lot more interesting, a lot more fun. Another thing as well is that powerful legendaries are what carry new archetypes. So this is more of a kind of a gameplay argument, but legendaries are typically cards that are designed to fit in the specific archetypes. And I think it should remain like this, by the way. I don't think it's a good thing to print very powerful legendaries that just fit in any deck. I don't think that's good for the game. However, they need to be powerful. Unfortunately, very often legendaries are very specialized for a specific archetype, but they're simply not powerful enough. But printing powerful legendaries will enable new archetypes to be made. So, for example, we got the 6/5 that allows you to double the value of of your raid card. This card is actually pretty cool and can be a reason to be playing like a raid deck. But because this card is too weak, or it's the only card that supports this archetype, it ended up just not mattering, and people don't play it. And this is a missed opportunity to create new archetypes. So let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean by better legendaries. So this is a good example here of legendaries that are very powerful, but you need to build a specific deck to make it work. But they're very powerful. So this is a good example. This is, in my opinion, this is the power level that I'm expecting from every single legendary. I know it's not realistic to expect this for every single legendary, but I would say at least 75% of legendary should be at least this power level. That's my expectation. Two examples of cards that maybe are too strong or too generally powerful. Maybe Poe and Luke Skywalkers are a bit too far into, they just are too overly playable, too playable in too many decks. So this is definitely where I wouldn't want to go. But as I said, push the power level of Legendary is very powerful, and as long as you make them specialized, as long as you make them work in specific archetypes, it will be alright. So, and this would be very beneficial for the game. And in many ways. Next one is better prestige. I think that FFG did a great job with the prestige in Jump to Lightspeed. Unfortunately, it hasn't been the case in Legend of the Force and in Secrets of Power. I think that Carbonites, which initially were quite a success for Fantasy Flight game at the beginning, strongly have declined in popularity after Legend of the Force and Secret of Power. And I think the main reason why that's the case is because since there's not really much of a collector market on Star Wars Unlimited, most of the people who buy Carbonite boosters simply because they want to have good-looking cards. And unfortunately, not every prestige is good-looking, and actually the majority of the prestige cards are not good-looking. So let me give you an example, like Eighth Brother, for example, like all this series of like cards here that had a really kind of ugly background. I'm sorry, but this card doesn't look good. It looks better in real life because of the foliage, I get this, but it's not, it's far below my expectations on what I think a prestige card should look like. A good example of a good-looking prestige from the Legend of the Force, I think, were the Father, the Son, and the Daughter. Those were pretty much the only three prestige cards that really looked nice. The other one really didn't look like it. And if I'm taking a more recent example, for example, from the Secrets of Power, all the once again, it's subjective. I'm sure there's gonna be people who are gonna enjoy that type of art, but I don't think those cards look good. I think, and it's about like half of the Outlaws kind of / Rebel prestige cards basically looked extremely bland and extremely monochromatic. I think this doesn't look good enough for a prestige card, and this is hurting the sales. So once again, I know it's subjective. I know some people probably like those prestige cards, but I think the majority don't like them, and that's the reason why not many people buy the Carbonites. And the good example, of course, of a grade are obviously the propaganda cards. Those are great example of good prestige, and those should be once again. We need better prestige in general, and we need to follow the same standard that were set by Jump to Lightspeed instead of the quality for the prestige. Also, one I think is important is to, so the artwork in the game is still all over the place, in my opinion. I didn't take the worst example, but I take the example of a card that sees a tremendous amount of play, which is Charismatic from the new set. And a lot of people have been pointing out, hey Pierre, hey Thork, this person is a male, not a female. And I was like, and honestly, like, to me on the art, it kind of looks like an old lady. So I am not aware. I didn't watch Andor before, so now I watch Andor, so now I know what Charismatic actually looks like. And I'm like, this looks nothing like the actor in the movie. Overall, this is only one example, but there's many examples like this. There's simply just too many cards in the game that have art that that are not up to standard. But more importantly, and something that is really specifically upsetting, is that they don't put the good art where it matters. They put the good art on the special cards that are going to be only accessible to a very small amount of people. And keep in mind that the art of your card game is the sign of your game. It's basically the outside postcard of your game. When people from the outside, when they look up Star Wars Limited and they see the card from Star Wars Limited, they're not seeing the cards. They're not seeing the tournament exclusive promos. They're seeing the basic cards. So in my view, the good art should be, I think every card should have good art, but specifically for the most important card of your game are the basic card, and those should have the one that have the best art, because that's what make the game look good, and that's what's going to attract people from the outside. Too many people, I cannot count the amount of people who've told me that they're not interested in Star Wars just because the art is not good enough. So one of the things you can do is improve the art, obviously, but also put the art where it matters. Put it on the regular cards. Karas Nemik is one of the most played card of Secrets of Power, and he has an ugly art. That is not acceptable. So, yeah, that's a big criticism I had with the game since set 1, and I don't think this is fixed. I still think it's a problem nowadays. Some people have been arguing, yeah, the art is getting better. I do not agree with this. I think they still think there's too many cards that I just simply don't have good enough art. I could give you 100 of examples in every set. I can give you at least 10 examples about art in every set. Another thing that I want to talk about is better foils. So they're getting rid of regular foil, that's fine, but I also believe that foliage in this game is just not very good. I think that one of the things is that the foils basically curl is one of the big criticisms that people have, and that's the reason why people are hesitant to put foil cards in their competitive deck, because they don't want to be tournaments to claim that their deck is marked. Personally, I've never had a problem with this, and I believe that once a card is sleeved, it usually doesn't curl, but it's a legitimate worry. So one of the things I was thinking about is something that is generally true, is that when a card is foiled on both sides, it actually doesn't curl. And I think that I understand that card back should be all looking the same, ideally speaking, but I believe that pretty much everybody nowadays plays with sleeves, especially if you're playing with foils. So I don't think there will be much harm in making the back of the card foil. So then this way, the card wouldn't curl. This is just an idea I'm throwing out there. But a big thing that I would want to foil is that I would like to have selecting foiling instead of, to create contrast instead of foiling the entire card. One of the things that modern card games do a lot is that instead of foiling specific part of the card, they're foiling the entire card. And this is terrible because it basically murks everything, especially since foil cards have a tendency to basically make cards darker. It kind of makes everything look like murky, and it doesn't create any contrast, and it doesn't look good. I believe selecting foiling is far better. What do I mean? Let me give you a couple of examples of selective foiling. This is from the Lord of the Rings TCG, and I believe this game, even though it has art that are basically directly taken from the movie, so the kind of lazy artwork, if you ask me, the foiling in this game is excellent. Because, okay, it's not very obvious here on the video, but basically on this card, the only part of the card that is actually foil is the ring itself, the border here, the card type, and this element here of the card. I think those 4 elements here are the only part of the card that are foil, and it makes the card look so much more beautiful. I'll give you another example here on this Palantir, where the ring of Denethor is foil, the Palantir itself is foil, then this is foil again, and this is foil. And it's, once again, makes the card looks very beautiful, and it makes the art, once again, it's hard to convey this on the video because on a fixed image, but if you look at those cards in real life, they are just regular foils and they look fantastic because they have selective foiling and they have contrast to them instead of having the entire card being foiled. So I believe especially with lightsaber, just any laser beams, any metallic part, all those part of the card can be foiled, while the other thing is not, and that creates a very nice contrast that makes the card look so much better, in my opinion. So I think better foils is something that we need, because obviously the regular foils are out of the way, but we still have hyperspace foil, and I do believe that hyperspace foil will look so much better if they had that type of selective foliage. In my opinion, if you can't make foil the right way, then maybe you shouldn't do them at all. And I include hyperspace foil in them. Moving on now to everything that I think we need for saving regular booster box. So obviously we've seen a couple of things being done here, putting the rare bases on the rare slots, and putting the prestige card obtainable from regular booster box. That's some really great step to the right direction, but I think those are very small improvement compared to the suggestions I'm going to make here. So the big one, of course, is better legendaries. I think better legendary is the number one thing that will save regular booster box and will make more people to buy regular booster box again. So there's this suggestion. That was a suggestion from Beton to make Showcase exclusive to regular box. And now that they've reduced the odds of Showcase being opened from Carbonite boosters, I feel like this is a bit of a redundant, so I don't think this is going to be implemented. Put Rare Blaze on the regular slot instead of rare slot. This has already been confirmed. Fewer leaders will make balancing leader easier for limited, which will make people want to play draft and sealed more often, which is going to make... So making draft and sealed better will make you more people want to buy packs, because they will buy packs by playing the limited play. And finally, I believe that they should decrease the print run of Carbonite boxes, and maybe also regular boxes as well. So I understand that you want to make the product available to everybody, but I believe they went too far into the print run. I think overall the print runs of boxes has been too high, which has devalued the price. So obviously if we make regular box more attractive, it will make them it means that they will devalue less. But I also think that the print run is also too high. That is specifically true for Carbonite box. And I'm expecting, since Carbonite boxes are now going to have less chance of getting Showcase, and since now it is possible to get prestige cards in regular box, I also believe that they need to, I think the demand for Carbonite box is going to decrease. We need to decrease the print run so Carbonite box become more rare, basically. And therefore they keep their value rather than just being completely devalued. Another thing that I think was a great idea from SIP that he put in the podcast is to create an incentive to order box from a local game store by adding a buy a box exclusive promo. So I think if you have a physical store that supports Star Wars Unlimited, you should be given special promos, and those promos should be buy a box promos that you get if you buy your first booster box in that local game store, instead of having people buying online. I think this would be great to support local game store and give an incentive for people to buy boxes. So what I mean by a promo cards, I mean once again promo using the frame that we've seen here for the weekly cards. Before we get to the rest of the video, I just want to let you know that you can pick up Hyperspace Disaster on Card Market for only €2. I think this card is gonna be one of the best rare in the set, and it's also likely to be one of the most important. It's likely to be even better after rotation, as I anticipate that Space Deck will be very, very powerful after the set after the game rotates. Now I'm going to talk about all my suggestions that I have for organized play, which you probably already know about if you followed my video about. I've made a video about how to make organized play better, so I'm not going to go into too much details on each of those points because I've already talked about them, but I still want to have everything in one place here, all my suggestions. First of all, we're going to talk very quickly about competitive support for Eternal. I believe that it's very, very important that Eternal gets support. I don't think it needs to happen right away from set 7, but at least after this, there needs to be some significant support for Eternal, meaning major tournaments in Eternal, not only PQs, but also sectoral qualifiers and regional championship in Eternal, and maybe possibly Galactic Championship partially being in Eternal format as well. And the reason for it is because if Eternal is not supported, and basically the only format they support is Premiere. What's going to happen is like every time there is a rotation, any card that rotates out instantly will lose all of its value, which is horrible for the game on long term. Eternal is a very important part of the ecosystem of Star Wars Unlimited because it allows cards to keep their value even when they rotate out, and I think that's super, super, super important. I also would like Eternal to have an extended 15 sideboard card. So I'm gonna explain a little bit why that's something I would want to have. The reason being is like one of the risks that you run if whenever you are playing Eternal, when you have formats where you have very, very big card pool, is like there's so many different decks that have widely different strategies that it becomes completely impossible to prepare for everything. And this is kind of an issue because then you create this kind of rock or paper scissors situation where the matchup that you have matters more than your skill. And this can happen in Eternal format sometimes, and I know I have a lot of experience in this because I play Magic in Eternal. I play both Modern and Legacy. And something that can help with that issue, of course, there's a specific card, that more versatile card that can help with this. There are cards that allow you to tutor from your sideboard that can help with that. But I believe one of the basic rules that would really be beneficial is just to expand the size of sideboard so there's more possibilities to be prepared for wider different decks and more agency for players to actually adapt themselves to the meta. And I think this would be really beneficial in order to make Eternal less of a format. I don't think that's needed right away, but I think eventually it would be good for Eternal to have an extended 15 sideboard cards. I also want very quickly about the ban list. I think that I would like the ban list of Eternal to start at least with Django or triple Dark Raid ban. I think that among all the busted things that have happened in Star Wars Unlimited since the beginning, whether you talk about Boba 1, whether you talk about Han 1 with DJ, whether you talk about Fourth Row, by far and not even close, the most busted deck that has ever existed in Star Wars Unlimited is obviously the Django Red from Jump to Light Speed. And this deck is going to be so much better with some of the new cards that got added. I'm mostly thinking about Fulminant Tricks. TDR is getting even better. I believe at least one of these two cards should be banned right away as we're getting into Eternal. I don't think it would be healthy for the game to have Django being completely legal. I wonder how much of the ban list they're gonna have. Maybe they're just gonna simply reuse the ban list from Premiere and start from that point on. I don't know exactly what's the right answer because I've obviously haven't play tested any Eternal so far, and we really don't know how things would go if everything was unbanned tomorrow. But one thing you can be sure of is that Django and TDR needs to stay banned. That's the only thing I'm strongly believing. Other things like DJ, they can create negative player experience, but I believe that those were not as big of an issue at all. So if you want to start to be very liberal and just embrace the fact that it's going to be a format for busted decks, I think you can make the argument of just keeping everything except Django and TDR, but at least those two cards need to be banned because they're far and away above the card I've talked about so far. Which brings me to more general statement about organized play. First of all, I think the prize wall system is a pain. There needs to be the fact that you have to queue hours to redeem your prize in almost every single event. That's terrible. I believe that they've made this a lot smoother, notably in the sector qualifiers in Munich, where you basically it was all like basically done online and it was a lot more fluid. I think that the number one thing that tournament organizer needs to get better for those big events is the prize wall. The current system is just a massive pain. Another thing that I've talked about in my video about organized play is like I wish there were a more solid rule set to help judges sort player mistakes from actual cheating. One of the things that's currently right now in Star Wars is I believe that the rules for mistakes is a little bit too liberal, and I think judges are very much just at their own mercy in order to basically kind of sort out what is a mistake and what is a cheating. And I would think it would be very beneficial for the judges to have a very solid rule set that says, okay, obviously there's always going to be context and judge appreciation in order to sort out a mistake from a cheat. but I wish that in the judge system there would be a more solid rule. Like, for example, just to give you an example, I believe that if your opponent reports a mistake that you've made, it shouldn't be treated as the same as you reporting your own mistake to the judge. For example, currently in the rule set there's no difference between the two, but I believe it should be. So this is an example like this, kind of more solid rule set to help judges sorting mistakes from cheating. One feedback I've been given for a very long time is to apply top cut tiebreaker rules to all Switch game. I believe draws and intentional draws have been very, very detrimental to the game, especially for smaller tournaments like planetary qualifiers. For large tournaments, I think IDs have been working pretty well, but for very large tournaments, for very small tournaments like PQs, which are the majority of the tournaments we play in Star Wars Unlimited, IDs are a massive, massive problem. And I think one of the ways to get rid of this is to make it so it's not possible to have draws anymore. And we already have rules that allow to make sure that games can never end in a draw, and that's called the tiebreaker rules. Once again, if you want more details about that, check out my video about organized play. It's going to be in the description below, but this is kind of my suggestion that I'm kind of reiterating here in this video. I also believe that there's a lot of room for improvement to make Star Wars Limited events more like Star Wars Unlimited convention rather than just big tournaments. I'm mostly thinking about celebrating signing cards, cosplay contests, fun thematic Star Wars Unlimited games, that kind of stuff. They still haven't really stepped up. Tournament organizers still haven't really stepped up in that particular area. I feel very bad that I've actually attended a content creator event where we actually had an actor signing cards in our event, but that does not exist for the general population. I found this to be criminal, and I wish this was more the case. It doesn't have to be Star Wars actors. It could be an artist of the game, or even like a designer. Like, it would just be so much more beneficial to have that. So I believe that this would be something that would be very beneficial. I think like right now, FFG still hasn't understood that tournaments needs to be just more than tournaments, especially for the majority of the population, which doesn't really care so much about competitive play. But still, I think that those events should be a celebration for the game, and everybody should be invited to come over and should have something to get out of this. I'm not even going to mention all the tournament problems that we have not receiving our promos. I still haven't received my promos from the Bilbao, from the Sector Qualifiers Bilbaos. Still haven't received my black packs. So that kind of thing. Finally, I also would like the PQ spread to be more evenly distributed. One of the most egregious thing is, like, I believe we have like double-digit PQs in places like Germany, like Great Britain, France, but in a country like Poland, which, if you are following the European competitive scene, Poland is one of the most active competitive scene in Europe. They only have 3 PQs. That just doesn't make any sense. There's simply just things that don't really make a sense, and you can see this in the attendance of PQs. You can see that PQs in Poland basically always kind of max out. So I believe this is also should be addressed. It's a smaller complaint, but still should be addressed. So what is my conclusion about all this? My conclusion is that 2026 will make or break Star Wars Unlimited. There are a lot of threats to the game and a lot of things that could start the decline of Star Wars. I don't think Star Wars Unlimited is on the decline right now. However, 2026 could be the year of the decline for Star Wars Unlimited. And there's a multiple reason for this. The first one is rotation. Rotation is a massive turning point for the game. And we don't know if will the more casual players quit after such a massive shift in the game, or will they appreciate the reset? That's a big of uncertainty. There's a big question mark on whether rotation is going to be good or bad for the game. I believe that from a purely logical standpoint, rotation is good for the game. But unfortunately, not everybody shares that opinion. There's a lot of people who simply do not want rotation in game, especially not a rotation that happens every 2 years, every year. So it is something that some people dislike, and that could really damage the game. So rotation is going to be a huge turning point for the game, and for better or for worse. Star Wars Unlimited right now is a relatively popular game. If you look at tournament attendance, it's a really popular game. But does it make enough money from Asmodee? Local game stores aren't making much money from Stew. We're seeing many local game stores dropping the game. We see the prices of boxes and the price of cards being way below MSRP. This is not a good sign for the game. And this is probably the biggest danger question mark that you have to put on Star Wars Unlimited. Is this massive problem, and this needs to be addressed in 2026. If FFG failed to address that issue in 2026, and I've given basically the ingredients to solve that problem in this video, if they don't manage to do so, I believe the game will start a declining phase. Another thing as well is like Riftbound is just around the corner. There's going to be many players already that have basically shifted from Star Wars Unlimited to Riftbound. We're seeing this even in my team, in Team Enigma, some of the most engaged players, some of the hardcore Star Wars Unlimited player. Those players are currently sniffing Riftbound, and I wouldn't be surprised if many players decide to shift from Star Wars Unlimited to Riftbound. This is the thing, is like card games have always been extremely competitive environment, and it's getting even more true every single year. And I'm really afraid that Riftbound could steal a lot of Star Wars Unlimited player. So this is also another threat to the game as well. But I also want to make sure that there's hope. I want to make very clear that there's a lot of hope for the game. First of all, set will be the first set where designers can properly integrate the 2024 feedback from the community. That's huge. We've already seen this, of course, with the rework of the packs. Most of the feedbacks that we saw earlier have been implemented. FFG has shown a great ability to listen. There's a lot of inertia. So whenever they receive a feedback, between the time the feedback is received and the time when they actually implement the feedback, there's almost 1 or 2 years that happen between each, which is very long. There's a lot of inertia in Fantasy Flight game, especially with a physical card game, but they do listen to the community. So that's obviously great. That's great. And finally, even though yes, products basically are sold well below MSRP, and local game stores are basically dropping the game left and right, in terms of tournament attendance, Set 5 and Set 6 are at a whole-time high. We had 2,500 participants for the Galactic Championship. That is insane number, even for Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic Standard. That's very high attendance for an event. Munich and Tilburg and Paris sector qualifiers sold out in a couple of hours. Those are 500 player tournaments that sold out in a matter of hours. I don't know if the situation is the same in the US, but in Europe it's crazy. It's actually very difficult sometimes to get a ticket for those big events. So that means they're doing things right with those sector qualifiers. And most local communities are growing, and the game is played and it's healthy, at least in terms of player base. There's a bit of a dip right now because it's the holiday season, of course, but if you zoom out and look at the game as a whole, it's a game that is being played, that's for sure. I also want to look back to my wish list from 2025. So I obviously made the exact same video as I'm doing right now. I made it back in 2025, and this is some of the feedback that I have about the game. Let's see how many of them actually got implemented. So, competitively playable cards in weekly packs. This was mostly addressed. I think that the playability of weekly play packs were a lot higher. Give up on the ugly frame. It took them time, but they actually did it as well. They're gonna do it at least in 2026. Low chance to get something very valuable. This was implemented. Now we have a low chance to get a legendary in weekly pack. That is great. Better price for major events. This has been implemented as well. Planetary Qualifier promos, they still are horrible. That they have not improved Planetary Qualifier promos. So this, I'm gonna put a negative on this one. We got our Luke Invader Showcase. We got Draft and Sealed tournaments. So now Draft and Sealed have become competitive format, which I think is great for the game. Rotation has been announced well in advance, so players could prepare for it. In terms of card design, Okay, in terms of card design, I believe that the overall cards got a lot stronger if you compare to Twilight of the Republic, but unfortunately it hasn't been true for leaders, which are, in my opinion, there's been a decline in power level on leaders, which I've addressed in earlier in the video. So this one, not quite there. And new archetype to be completely viable, this has been mostly addressed. I feel like the newer set have done a great, especially Legend of the Force and Jump to Light Speed, have done a great job of adding new archetypes to the game, which was a complaint that I had from set 3 and set 4, is that yes, they were adding a lot of cards to the game that were very powerful, but they were just boosting existing archetypes. They were not really doing a great job at creating new archetypes. And I think this has mostly been addressed. And yeah, better price for major events. I think prices for major events are actually very good right now. That's why, and I think that's one of the big reasons why sector qualifiers and regional qualifiers actually are selling out. So if you look at everything that I've actually asked for in 2025, most of those things have been implemented. And some of those things were implemented actually very early in 2025. So that means there is hope. It means that FFG is listening and is implementing the feedback for the most part. And sometimes even before we even ask for it. So this is good, and for that reason, I want to say a very big thank you to Fantasy Flight Games. Yes, the game is not perfect. Yes, there's a lot of things they get wrong, but they're listening to the community, and I still believe they do an amazing job with the game. And I hope that if they can address those issues, the game has a long life to look forward to. And I also believe that even though the game has a lot of issues, those are easy issues to fix. And I want to emphasize on this. So thank you, FFG, and yeah, we hope all the best for 2026. Thank you for following the video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe as well. If you got any suggestion that I didn't mention in this video, anything that you wish for that FFG would do with Star Wars Unlimited in 2026, please put it in the comment below, and maybe FFG will read it. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.